Welcome to Let's Talk Death, conversations to inform and inspire. Let's Talk Death is a series of conversations with some amazing people from various fields. Our goal through these conversations is to normalize, educate, and demystify the taboo around death, dying, and the journey of grief. Hello, welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Death. I'm Fran Solomon.
And I'm Andy McNeil.
And we are thrilled to be your hosts for these conversations. Let's Talk Death is brought to you by Heal Grief, a social support network creating community after someone has died. Everything we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone.
Our goal with this program is to have a friendly chat with some amazing people so we can help normalize and educate our Heal Grief community. Our guest today is Jacob Cooper. Jacob is a clinical social worker, certified Reiki Master, and certified hypnotherapist who specializes in past life regression therapy, working privately with clients through online services. Inspired by his childhood near-death experience and transformative experiences, he facilitates spiritual awareness and empowerment seminars. He also provides seminars assisting those dealing with issues in mental and physical health, grief, end-of-life issues, and marginalized populations. He is the author of the recent release, Life After Breath, How a Brush with Fatality Gave Me a Glimpse into Immortality. Jacob currently resides and practices in Long Island, New York. Jacob, we are delighted to have you as a guest on our show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a true honor to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Jacob, before we get into your work, I want to dive more into your childhood near-death experience. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, for listeners of my story and those who have known my work and maybe are new to it, the near-death experience phenomenon in general is getting a lot more track and attention. My near-death experience, though, is, I would say, an outlier within an outlier, in a sense that it happened at the age of 3 years old, and I have full retention of it. And a lot of people are in disbelief of that, and there's controversy or skepticism, which is healthy. It gets people to think differently about their prism of reality as they see it. And so I guess my job through the experience was to kind of shake up consciousness and how people see the nature of the self and reality. But my experience happened in September of 1993. I was 3 years old. I grew up in the Jewish tradition, and it was a couple of days right before the day of Yom Kippur, the day where your soul is ready to meet the Creator, and you're trying to remove yourself clean and get yourself clean for all the year that you had. Little did I know I was about to meet my Creator, but it wasn't through, my own religious practice. It was through something totally different. I had a near-death experience as a result of pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough, which could be a highly contagious, fatal virus, upper respiratory virus, which runs a lot of parallels with today's times for infants and children, and it could lead to choking, coughing, and suffocation, and fatality, which I experienced, and even adults who were non-vaccinated with it, still have a lot of repercussions from it. It's quite potent. But I went to a park with family friends. It was kind of like an innocent day at a park, and I went to a playground, and I went up in a slide, and I climbed, each rung of the ladder to a slide. But at the end of the top, my breathing was becoming a lot more belabored, and I literally suffocated. At the time, we didn't know that I had whooping cough and that I had this virus, and so I tried to catch my breath, and there was literally nothing. And then, moments later, every part of my body, due to the deprivation of oxygen, it was no longer able to function properly, and it just began to shut down as if you have a power breaker in a home and you shut down each part of it. And my body was losing grip to the eventual point where I recognized that my body wasn't working. And so much like when your car's not starting, you get out of the car and you check your engine. And so for me,
Wow.
I got out of my body and I was just kind of observing in a disembodied state what was happening, neurophysiologically within my body. And at the time, most adults aren't privy to, to this kind of stuff unless you go to intensified medical school. But at 3 years old, I experienced the clear notion that there's a lot more higher intelligence past what we know within the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and our abilities to really get out of, our body. We have a lot more heightened awareness of not just other upper etherical, entities, which we'll get into, but also parts of ourselves that we lose sight of. But I was able to see different parts of my body, and the last part of my body that I was in was I was able to become aware of my brain. I saw my brain, due to the deprivation of oxygen, was beginning to suffocate and just kind of like depower. And moments later, I just felt and saw a large snap and crack within my brain. And literally, when my brain cracked open and my brain snapped in half, was when I would best describe as when God came in, or when Spirit came in, and I was an upward trajectory into infinite time, infinite euphoria, infinite awareness. Um, beyond human comprehension. And in this NDE, near death experience that I had, uh, it was very informative with the life that I live, as well as the life that, we all live, in a sense that I was. Have the clear understanding that this lifetime was a lot more orchestrated by deeper forces at hand than sometimes we forget. And this is all a spiritual thing that's not, monopolized by a few people that we could call spirit. But I had encounters with spirit guides, angels. I was able to have, an awareness of God and Christ consciousness. And I had connections with loved ones on the other side that I connected to, and I was able to be aware of life purpose and karmic ties with this lifetime that went beyond it. And I was able to kind of have an understanding of where I wanted to go from where, the genesis of it all, so to speak, and what this lifetime was about, that it was divinely orchestrated with an intelligence far greater than my own. But, you know, the most potent part about the NDE was the power of choice. I was given the power to decide to stay or with my loved ones on the other side, and the angelic beings, or to go. And I, it's rare cases that you're given choice. Most cases you're told, no, this is not your time. And so I was given a visualization of what this life would be like, and I saw myself in the future really, providing, this same example of the continuity of life after death and living proof of our eternity of the soul. And I said, as beautiful as the other side is, reminding people and being a harbinger that we don't die, that we are eternal, that this lifetime is a lot more than what we think, is much more exquisite and beautiful than the other side. The other side will be the other side, but I wanted to bring the hereafter into the here now in this life. And I decided to stay, and with decision, with thought, you know, that led me on this path, and, in this body. But it
Amazing.
was a second kind of decision. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting, and a number of people who we've had conversations with who've had near-death experiences, um, they talk about that there was, and you were so young, but at the same time that there was their life before, and then their life after that, and how it shaped, right, and like how it shaped so much the way not only they saw the world or experience, but just the way that they lived within the world at that point. And it's interesting to me because you had only had just a few years even before that, just as far as you know uh, that goes. But I'm curious if for you, because here you are, here you sit now, and you've really dedicated your life to helping others. So that in many ways is part of shaping you and who you are in this world.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like an age reversal that I had, where in a sense that we climb to wisdom, we find wisdom, so we think within later in life. But what it informed me that the genesis of who we are is wisdom. We're here to apply that infinite wisdom. And so I didn't want to be like Benjamin Buttons and Brad Pitt and just, be old as a young kid and then just have this age reversal. But I think the goal for us all is to remember who we are. And sometimes from losing ourselves, we're able to find ourselves. And so when I lost my breath, when I lost my body, was actually when I was able to take off some of that amnesia that it was even occurring at the age of 3, and remember myself, and remember, what this is about. And so I think in a way it totally transformed my life, the most pressing area was just the discrepancy between the body and what's underneath that. I think in this, reality, we look at a physical structure and that's synonymous with who one is. But the two at times couldn't be more diametrically opposites. And there's a body, but beyond that, is a soul, and the soul could be, however evolved or old or young, but uh, at times there's a misrepresentation of children and young kids or even older kids. I think you could be young and old and being young. It's has to do with that inner life that you're connected to and living life from the inside out versus outside in. You know.
That brings me to a question. So you specialize in past life regression. So do you see one's soul as an expression of their past lives as well as their present? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of just kind of stigmatization of reincarnation and just a lot of this almost punishment type thing where you come back, you're a bad person and you have to like rectify some stuff. And I try to take away some of the pathology of it and I try to keep it strength based, where in a sense that, for instance, how do you explain Mozart playing the piano at such a young age, or Beethoven or Michael Jackson sing? I think we carry over not just what we label as the blockages or the bad stuff, but also some of our greater gifts. And so I think for some of us to have certain interests or certain talent and certain capabilities that just could not be gained in one lifetime, possibly, no matter how long you sat at that clarinet or played that trombone or sung, so I try to really keep it very much balanced. Where I do believe, yes, there are, this life is not a burden. It's an opportunity. I don't think it's an opportunity necessarily to learn, but because I think we all know it inside, but it's rather the opportunity to implement what we already know and to integrate that and to put the tire on the pavement of what is inside of us, so that that leads to an inner transformation and inner evolution within ourselves throughout carnations.
So, so I am curious about so the book that you just wrote.
Yeah.
Um, tell us a little bit about tell us a little about what the book's about, what you hope to be able to communicate through this, and kind of the audience that you're talking to.
Yeah. The opening quote within my book is by someone who I followed very closely in his work, Dr. Wayne Dyer. And his quote was really, you don't want to die with your music still in you. You don't want to die with that story in you. And as long as your story is being told, even if the body leaves, there's no way, I talk about eternity of the soul, but there's eternity of our story within, what we leave behind, the ripple effect. And so this book, in so many regards, is a way of paving it forward. I think we've all been in the dark night of the soul, and then we open up that book, whether that's by, Sylvia Brown or Louise Hay or, whoever, that might be. And that book invigorates us apart within ourselves, and we're able to be resilient. And so as whenever I would be inspired by books, I always wanted to join those faces on the library and just kind of live there. That's where I wanted to live. And I always manifested that. I always wanted that. I was never a natural writer. I struggled throughout the majority of my college career early on, and was taking remedial writing and reading courses in a community college. And so on paper, I'd probably be the last candidate to write a book. I was always, the poor student and everything like that. But I understood the value of story and what story can do and how we live through story. And and I think this book essentially was expedited because the narrative of the story that we were hearing was so much heaviness, so much just paralysis, within life, and just feeling, very hopeless, or hands behind her back. And that's all was very real and true and not to be bypassed. But I think within my control, I wanted to have a different narrative, a narrative that would be able to generate the hope past people's pain and paralysis. And really, that was the goal of life after breath. And that's something that I was given in my near death experience. When I felt lifeless, I was reminded of eternal life. And I think on an indirect or direct basis, I wanted to do the best that I can to plant that seed, for other people to find this deeper gear of life, to go through the terrain that we're facing, and and to, sometimes the terrain forces us to really go into that deeper gear. So that was the goal, is to allow people to just remember who they are and what they're connected to. Right?
Yeah.
So, what particularly inspires most of your clients to participate in your therapy? Are they grieving? Are they feeling lost? Are they feeling stuck? Are they what is the commonality that you find?
I think today it's interesting. You have to speak to the times, and I think most of us throughout this past year have experienced acute stress or trauma. That's really, very much macro, that we're going through. But within, my clients, it's a very eclectic, clientele. I say, if you have a body, you have a brain. I will do the best I can to help you. And so I work with a lot of different clients, from young children to, I see clients with Medicare, and you could be younger and still have Medicare, but you know what I'm saying. It's 65. I don't want to well, Paul McCartney says when you're old, you're 64. I disagree with that, but in the Beatles, but yeah, it's a broad-based population. But what I've been really doing a lot has been with grief clients, and I'm going to be presenting within a month. It's funny that your name is Fran, because I'm presenting with another organization, the Forever Family Foundation, next month, and the founder's also name was Fran too, Fran Skinsberg, and she's passed away, and now her husband took over it. So I'm going to be presenting with them. But I mean, if you ask me, it's anyone who's marginalized, anyone who's going through a difficult time, anyone who needs that extra support. Um, I'm all for. And uh, I think at times there's a disadvantageous circumstance with the mental health care system, and I want to make sure that I'm accessible to people, and from all socioeconomic backgrounds and stuff like that, that people could get the help that they need and resources. You know.
Yeah, very much so. So let me ask you this: as you grew and you decided on a career and the things that you do and what you're doing right now, are there any things that have surprised you in the work that you've done with clients or with people who you're interacting with? Are there things that you even learned then that you were like, "Oh, I wasn't exactly expecting this, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I was saying, when you open up yourself to sacred possibilities invite and open themselves up to you. And so I think, at least with my near-death experience, it wasn't a monopolization of truth or a closed-endedness towards the nature of reality. It would rather got me on this role of having this Zen philosophy of this beginner's mind and an open-endedness to life's possibilities, as I really saw that the experience of the afterlife was not the full totality of it, but rather just a small snippet of it, as you can't make the infinite finite. It's beyond comprehension, it's ever ending. In staying in the classroom, certainly, that gives you the basic premise. It's funny that they use masters, because I think the masters is really the beginner. That's when you're able to practice. But my clients are my greatest teachers, each one of them. And the most difficult ones get me the best. So I embrace the challenge. I embrace the ones that get you to think. And, it's a pleasure. But some clients, they have a very high IQ, or sometimes lower EQ, lower EI and EQ and stuff like that. And so, they're able to intellectualize stuff, but then they're able to really translate it. And so at times those could be challenging, because they're probably smarter than I am at my job almost. And so you're trying to teach them, or just, show them a different direction, and they could run circles around you with this kind of stuff. So those are fun. But I think I draw my inspiration from my clients just in terms of what they're able to endure. It's,
mm,
when you're in mental health, when it's not just mental health, they're going through other comorbidities. They have family members, usually with an addiction. They themselves, a lot of them go through pain management, because there's a big, mind body connection. And I
yeah,
rarely have a client who doesn't go through physical, pain. And, so that's something that's not educated enough or spoken enough or highlighted enough. It's just a lot of the physical pain and ailments that people go through. But no, they're my greatest teachers. But I think the thing that surprised me the most was just the high receptivity of the book and how people have taken to it. And I think for viewers, I don't say this in a self-aggrandizing kind of way. In myself, it's a cool story, but something that I really buried behind. It wasn't
Mm.
until I read Betty Adie's book, Embraced by the Light, that I had a universality in a language behind my experience. And that book gave me a new life. And so in my mind, I had this, experience that I just kind of like very much kept close to heart. But I recognize experiences are not about you. It's rather about the ripple effect. And so, yes, people have to come to their own conclusions, and oftentimes it has to come with their, awareness of consciousness, and very little to do with you. But from planting the seed, it's been amazing to see, some of the trees and blossoming flowers that people have gained from this. And they give me credit, but I say, this is you. You found yourself in this story. And that's the point of my story, is for people to relate to it and find themselves, and not to put a near-death experiencer up on a pedestal, but rather for it to hit a chord that's quite familiar within themselves.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Jacob, we're almost out of time, but before we move on, people who are viewing often want to know how they can connect with our guests, and I wonder, how would people connect with you and with your book, with your work?
Mhm. Yeah, so if you're interested in my book, Life After Breath, it is on Amazon. And I know Anita Morjani endorsed it, and Dr. Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience. And it's with a publisher in California. So you could look up Life After Breath. I think there's someone else with the same title, but this is by Jacob Cooper. It's, so the person who wrote it was not named Jacob Cooper. So, and it's got a cover with like a white cover with angels. And, people could go on my website too, if they are interested, at jacobLcooper.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Jacob Cooper LCSW, and Facebook page, Jacob Cooper LCSW. And there, each day I post an inspirational post. I sit in prayer and sit in meditation, and I just ask every day, what's the what's the oxygen of the soul, or what I refer to as inspiration, that people not want to hear, but people need to hear today. And every day without fail, something usually comes. So I try to have that, inspired message for a day. I think that's what keeps us going. That feeds the soul, that feeds that inner part of us, that needs to constantly, be generated inspiration too. So
Amazing. Jacob, I don't know if you know, Anita Morjani was one of our first guests on Let's Talk Death.
yeah, no, it's funny. Anita's someone that I followed religiously throughout the years. I couldn't speak higher volumes of her, but I watched all of her videos, and to me, she's just a gold standard across the board,
She's
from
lovely. She's
top
lovely
down.
in person too.
I couldn't speak higher volumes. Yeah.
She's lovely in person. So Jacob, I want to thank you so much for being a guest here at Let's Talk Death, and for the inspiration, for the story that you shared, and the inspiration for your work and your book. Thank you.
Thank you for making it all possible. It's because of you that this book is out there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for those joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Death. If you would like to learn more about Heal Grief, please visit us at healgrief.org. At healgrief.org, you can learn more about all of our programs and resources, including our national network of support for grieving young adults called Actively Moving Forward.
And if you know a bereaved young adult, refer them to our AMF app, where adults of all ages connect with others experiencing a similar death loss. And last, make sure you sign up on healgrief.org to receive our newsletters for links for future episodes of Let's Talk Death.
And so again, we thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on Let's Talk Death.